Hey, my name is Joe Maharsky, and I served the United States Navy in 1967 in Vietnam on a destroyer escort, the USS Brister, DER 327. Admiral Zumwalt was the Chief of Naval Operations while I was in Vietnam, and his son Elmo III was on swift boat in my unit. Our casualty rate in Coastal Division 11 in Antoy was, at the time that I was there, 82% killed or wounded. And that was for a 1-year tour of duty.
Both my brother and I served in the military, and my father never really sat us down and said, you had an obligation to serve. But I think it was almost by osmosis. We saw his commitment to his country and his dedication, and we felt an obligation, therefore, to serve as well.
He cared about us, and he told me personally in '95 that he felt guilty because when the casualty list came in, every day he would read backwards. And that was because they were in alphabetical order. And he was looking to see if his son was on there.
In 1968, my father took over command of all the naval forces in Vietnam, and he immediately launched operations that had the boats operating in many of the narrow waterways there. The good news was that as a result of the naval activity that was interdicting the enemy supply lines, the casualty rate for the U.S. Army fell drastically because the enemy was not able to get his supplies. The bad news was that the casualty rate for the sailors, American sailors, went up because they were operating in these heavily vegetated waterways, and the enemy was able to set up ambushes close in. My father found that Agent Orange was available, and Agent Orange is a defoliant that would strip the trees of all their vegetation. The after effects, you literally have these barren trees for hundreds of feet on either side of the river. That forced the enemy further back to set up his ambushes, and as a result the casualty rate for the Navy dropped from 72% to 6%. Before he used Agent Orange in Vietnam, he had asked for assurances. The chemical companies assured him that there were no harmful effects when in fact they knew differently.
I found out in October and that I was affected and have cancer from Agent Orange, and I just finished 9 weeks, 5 days a week of radiation, and the prognosis is good. I have no hard feelings at all that he sprayed it. In fact, I agree with him.
My father had made it his lifelong responsibility of making sure that other veterans would be covered by proper medical care due to the spraying of Agent Orange.
That the Admiral said that job leading us in Vietnam was the hardest one that he ever had, because in World War II and in Korea he was with his men during battles, and it was a lot harder for him not to be there. The missions that we went on, he knew how dangerous they were, but he felt they were important. All of the swift boat sailors I know would tell you the same thing that I'm telling you about Admiral Zumwalt, and never complained about the missions that we got sent on. And that was the respect that they all had for him.
Prior to being selected as Chief of Naval Operations, he was commanded the naval forces in Vietnam, and he really saw what his sailors were able to do there in that war, and how unselfishly they committed themselves to fighting that conflict. And so that's one of the things that influenced him when he did become Chief of Naval Operations. He felt there was no reason why these sailors who had proven themselves in combat couldn't be allowed to wear neatly trimmed beards and mustaches and so forth like their civilian counterparts did.
In 1991, I listened to a radio station, and I heard that he was going to be interviewed on the radio, so I put my veteran shirt on with this swift boat pin that I have on my shirt, and I went to the radio station and waited for him. And he walked over and hugged me. And he said, "God bless you, son." And I believe that he said that because he felt we were his sons. I've had other people say, "God bless you, son," but that was because they were old enough to be my father. And he treated us like we were his sons in Vietnam. He cared about us, and he gave us something that other officers didn't, and that was respect.